The big project meeting turned into a public execution. I stood by the whiteboard, my charts and projections a meticulously built facade, as Mr. Hayes systematically dismantled my entire marketing strategy. "Frank's approach makes far more sense," he announced, gesturing to my rival. "You clearly don't have the stomach for this. Do you, Mark?" The room watched, silent, as he threw my binder into the recycling bin. The new executive assistant showed up mid-October. Her name was Sarah. She moved with a certain economy of motion, a quiet confidence that wasn't typical for someone starting in Mr. Hayes's office. Most people came in looking a little overwhelmed, a little green around the edges. Sarah, however, seemed to already know where everything was, or at least she carried herself like she did. My desk was on the same floor just down the hall from Mr. Hayes's corner office. It gave me a view of everyone who went in or out. I noticed her almost immediately, not just because she was new, but because she stood out. Her hair was a dark auburn, pulled back neatly, and she wore simple dresses, nothing flashy. She just had a way about her, a focus in her eyes that caught my attention. It was a problem, I knew. Company policy regarding inter-office relationships, especially with an executive's direct staff, was clear enough to be etched in stone. But the moment she smiled at something one of the other marketing reps said, a little crinkle forming at the corners of her eyes, I felt it. Hooked was the word that came to mind. Our first real conversation happened at the coffee machine. The worn beige contraption always seemed to be leaking, a small brown puddle perpetually clinging to its base. I was fumbling with a sachet of instant oatmeal, having forgotten my mug yet again. She was there, filling a delicate white cup, the steam rising around her face. I made some dumb joke about the machine having a permanent cold, and to my surprise, she actually laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a genuine, open sound that made the dull hum of the office recede for a second. "You're funny," she said, stirring her coffee slowly, her voice low and even, a quiet current that seemed to run right through me. My skin felt a sudden prickle. I managed to grin, feeling a little less like the guy whose project had been publicly trashed a month earlier. Those quick exchanges by the coffee machine turned into longer chats. We'd talk about the weather, about the latest office memos, then about smaller, more personal things. What we did on weekends, what kind of movies we liked. She asked me once about what I really wanted to do away from all this. I told her about a vague idea I had for a small business, something with woodworking. She listened, not with polite attention, but with an actual interest that surprised me. I asked her the same, and she spoke of wanting stability, of having a place that felt her own. We both understood the unwritten rules of our workplace, the quiet pact everyone made to keep things professional, especially with Mr. Hayes. But the pull between us felt stronger than any memo. It was a steady current, drawing us in. One evening after everyone else had left, we found ourselves alone in the deserted hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting long shadows. We had been talking for almost an hour, leaning against the cold plaster wall. "We can't," Sarah whispered, her gaze drifting towards the closed door of Mr. Hayes's office, her voice barely audible. Her worry was a palpable thing in the quiet space. I moved closer, my hand finding hers. A quick, almost unconscious gesture. "What he doesn't know won't hurt him," I said, my voice low, trying to be reassuring. It felt like a gamble, a line I was willing to cross. We started with professional coffee, a quiet agreement to meet outside work hours, just to talk. It felt like a necessary step, a way to test the waters without plunging in too deep. That quickly morphed into secret lunches at a small cafe a few blocks from the office, a place with worn booths and an aroma of stale coffee and grilled cheese. It became our sanctuary. We'd talk about work, about our lives, about the growing tension between us. The risks were always there, a low thrum beneath every conversation, but the thrill of getting away with it, of sharing something just for us, made it worth it. Then came the stolen moments in the supply closet. The air was thick with the smell of paper and toner. It started with a quick brush of hands, then an accidental lingering touch, then a shared, breathless kiss. The adrenaline was a sharp taste in my mouth, the fear of discovery a constant companion. "This is insane," Sarah murmured one afternoon, her breath warm against my ear, as she pressed against me in the copy room, her body tense with a nervous energy that mirrored my own. I could feel her heart racing against my chest. I pulled her tighter, my hand on the small of her back. "Don't worry," I whispered, glancing at the empty hallway. "Everyone's in a meeting." The risk was immense, the quiet defiance of the rules a powerful aphrodisiac. Soon the cafe and the supply closet weren't enough. We needed more space, more time. She invited me to her apartment, a modest place downtown with sparse furniture, but a welcoming, lived-in feel. It became our own little world. We cooked simple meals, talked for hours on her worn sofa, sharing stories of our pasts. Her childhood had been hard, marked by instability, and a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. Mine wasn't much better, a father who was rarely home, a house that always felt too quiet. We found a common ground in those histories, a shared understanding of what it meant to build something from nothing. One evening as we sat on the floor picking at takeout, she looked at me, a thoughtful expression on her face. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" Sarah said, the question hanging in the air, contemplating a future that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. About 2 months after we started meeting at Sarah's apartment, the shift began. It wasn't a sudden break, but a slow, almost imperceptible withdrawal. My calls would sometimes go straight to voicemail, and texts that once received immediate replies now sat for hours, sometimes a full day, before she'd get back to me. Her excuses were always vague: a busy day, a dead phone battery, falling asleep early. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself it was just the natural rhythm of things, the honeymoon period wearing off. But a faint unease had started to settle in my gut. At work, the changes were more visible. From my desk, I could see her through the open door of Mr. Hayes' outer office. Her attention seemed fractured. Her hand often gravitated to her purse, pulling out her phone for a quick check. Her thumb scrolling with a nervous energy I hadn't seen before. Then she'd stand abruptly, walk quickly down the hall, and step into an empty conference room, or sometimes just outside the main door. Her voice hushed, her back to me. The calls were always brief, never lasting more than a few minutes, but their frequency and the way she held the phone, almost cradling it, spoke volumes. I started noticing a pattern: sudden changes of plans for our evenings, usually at the last minute. "Something came up," she'd text, or "I'm just too tired tonight, Mark." When we did meet, sometimes her eyes would have a faraway look, as if part of her was still elsewhere, processing something I wasn't privy to. She'd nod at what I was saying, but her gaze would drift past me, out the window, or fixate on some distant point on the wall. One Tuesday evening, after she'd canceled dinner twice that week, I pressed her. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. We were standing by her apartment door, ready for me to leave. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, then turned and offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her lips were tight, a little too still. "Just family stuff," she said, shrugging slightly, avoiding my gaze. "My sister, you know how it is." I wanted to push, to ask for details, but her tone was dismissive, a signal to drop it. I tried to shake off the unease. Mr. Hayes was a demanding boss, known for his sudden mood swings and impossible deadlines. It made sense that she was under pressure. Anyone would be distracted working for him. I told myself it was just stress, nothing more. Sarah often complained about Mr. Hayes. Her voice would grow tight, almost brittle, as she recounted his latest demand for a presentation that had to be ready by morning, or his condescending remarks about her competence in front of other executives. "He's just a mean streak, you know," she'd say, her hands gripping her coffee mug. "One minute he's fine, the next he's tearing into me over something minor." She talked about the way he'd snapped at her for a misfiled document, or criticized her choice of paper clips. "You should just quit," I told her one night, watching the frustration contort her face. We were at her place, the dim light of her living room casting shadows. "You're smart, Sarah. You could do so much better than being his punching bag." I genuinely believed it. She had a sharp mind, a good head for organization. She deserved more. She looked at me then, a faint, almost bitter smile playing on her lips. "You think it's that easy?" She laughed, a sound devoid of humor, hollow and distant. Just pack up. Leave? Mark, this isn't just a job. What do you mean? I asked, confused. To me, it was clearly taking a toll on her some. This position, she continued, her voice gaining a firmer, more calculating edge, it opens doors, connections, networking, Mark. Being Mr. Hayes's assistant, it puts me in rooms with people I'd never meet otherwise. It's about access, a stepping stone. Her ambition, once something I admired, now felt cold, almost clinical. I didn't like her tone, the way she spoke of people and opportunities as if they were mere resources. But I understood the drive, to a point. I knew what it felt like to claw your way up, to want something more. Then the invitation for the annual company holiday party arrived, a glossy card with embossed lettering. It was usually a big affair, everyone from the CEO down to the interns, a chance to let off steam. We could go together, I suggested casually one evening, trying to sound nonchalant. It felt like a small step, a way to show we were a unit, even if only subtly. Her reaction was immediate and sharp. No, she said, her voice cutting through the quiet. Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic. No, we can't, Mark. It's too risky. For my job. I felt a cold prickle spread through me. Risky? How? It just is, she insisted, her words rushing out. As Mr. Hayes's executive assistant, I need to be above reproach. My reputation, it's everything. Any hint of impropriety, it could jeopardize everything I'm trying to build here. The word hung in the air, heavy and unwanted. Impropriety, is that what I was to her, a risk? A potential stain on her carefully constructed image? The sting was sharp, a sudden jab to the chest. Impropriety? Is that what I am to you? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. She looked at me then, her gaze unwavering, colder than I expected. This job, Mark, it's my future. I can't risk it, not even for us. I pulled my rented sedan into the sprawling parking lot of the Riverside Country Club. The place was all manicured lawns and towering oak trees, a world away from the dusty industrial park where our office building sat. Lights strung through the trees cast a warm, inviting glow, but I felt a familiar pang of being out of place, like a cheap suit in a room full of tailored wool. I smoothed the lapel of my own dark gray suit, the one I only wore for weddings and company events, and walked towards the grand entrance. Sarah had made it clear she wouldn't go with me, citing risk. Yet a part of me, a hopeful, foolish part, still thought I might catch her eye, that we might share a knowing glance from across the room. Inside, the ballroom was already buzzing. Crystal chandeliers cast a dazzling light over the polished dance floor, and a live band played something generic and upbeat. I found my way to the bar, ordered a scotch, neat, and leaned against the cold marble, trying to look comfortable while making small talk with a couple of accountants whose names I barely remembered. My eyes kept scanning the crowd, searching for a flash of auburn hair, a particular way she held her head. Each passing minute felt heavy. Then I saw her. She stood across the room by the large fireplace, a focal point of subdued elegance. Her dress was black, sleek, cut to flatter, and utterly unlike anything I'd ever seen her wear to the office. Her hair was down, styled in soft waves that framed her face, catching the light. She looked stunning, polished, a woman completely transformed, a world away from the Sarah who wore sensible shoes and ate takeout on her living room floor. She was laughing, a bright, clear sound, as she stood beside Mr. Hayes and his wife Eleanor. She played the part perfectly, an invaluable extension of his professional image. My heart gave a lurch, a sudden sharp thud against my ribs. For a fraction of a second, as she turned her head, our eyes met. Across the crowded room, past the glittering decorations and the bobbing heads, our gazes locked. I expected a sign, a faint lift of a corner of her mouth, a secret smile, anything that acknowledged the months we'd spent together. The whispered confessions, the stolen moments. But there was nothing. Her eyes, usually so expressive, were cold, unyielding. She looked right through me, as if I were a piece of furniture or perhaps just a ghost, an echo of a life she no longer recognized. It was like looking into winter ice on the Platte River, beautiful but utterly devoid of warmth. Then Mr. Hayes's booming voice, easily cutting through the ambient chatter and the band's music, fractured the moment. "Mark, over here!" He waved me over with a dismissive flick of his hand. "Come meet my invaluable assistant, Sarah Olson." My legs felt suddenly weak, the floor beneath me swaying. My scotch felt heavy in my hand. I managed to set it down on a passing tray, trying to compose myself, forcing a semblance of normalcy onto my face. I walked towards them, each step feeling like a mile. My stomach churned, a knot tightening with every approaching foot. When I reached the small group, Mr. Hayes beamed, his hand resting on Sarah's shoulder. "Sarah, this is Mark Davies, one of our marketing guys. Good man, good man. Just needs to get his head screwed on straight." He chuckled, completely oblivious to the sudden suffocating tension that had descended. I extended my hand to her, my palm feeling clammy. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Olson," I managed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, forcing them out with an effort that felt monumental. Her handshake was firm, professional, her fingers cool against mine. It lasted only a second, a fleeting touch that conveyed absolutely nothing. "Likewise, Mr. Davies," she replied, her voice even, modulated, a perfect blend of respect and distance. There was no flicker of recognition in her eyes, no subtle cue, no ghost of a memory. It was like shaking hands with a complete stranger, a colleague I was encountering for the very first time. The shared past, the intimate moments, the whispered dreams, all of it had been erased, meticulously wiped clean from her memory, or at least from her performance. Mr. Hayes continued to ramble on, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding beside him. He praised Sarah's efficiency, her organizational skills, her dedication. "She's indispensable, truly. Best assistant I've had in years. Couldn't run the place without her." His words were a background hum, a dull throb against the sickening lurch I felt in my stomach. The entire world we'd built together, the secret apartment, the shared meals, the whispered hopes, all of it shattered in that moment, reduced to dust under the bright lights of the country club. I stood there, trapped, watching them, the knot in my gut tightening with each passing second as the harsh, undeniable reality settled in. This wasn't a temporary act. This was her. This was who she was now. After the company party, a switch flipped inside me. The casual observations I'd made before hardened into an intense, almost obsessive scrutiny. I started keeping a closer eye on Sarah and Mr. Hayes, no longer just glancing, but watching, searching for details I'd previously dismissed or simply hadn't seen. The office, once a place of mundane routine, now felt charged, every interaction a potential clue. I noticed the way she lingered by his office door, a little too long when delivering documents. Her posture subtly shifted towards him, a slight tilt of her head. I caught quick, shared glances between them across the open floor, a micro-expression passing between their eyes that was too knowing, too private, to be merely professional. The way his gaze would follow her as she walked away, a possessive quality I hadn't registered before. Then there was the banter. I started to overhear it, fragments carried on the air when their office doors were ajar. Low voices, a certain lilt to Sarah's tone, a chuckle from Mr. Hayes that sounded far too warm. "Oh, Mr. Hayes, you're too kind," I heard her say one afternoon, the words light, almost teasing. I saw his hand rest for a moment on her arm as he leaned in to show her something on his computer screen, a gesture that lingered just a beat too long. They weren't overt, these moments, but in accumulation they began to weave a pattern, a fabric of intimacy that had nothing to do with work. The whispers in the office, which I'd previously ignored as idle gossip, now took on a grim significance. By the water cooler in the break room, snippets would drift my way. "Have you noticed how close Sarah is with Mr. Hayes?" someone would say, their voice lowered. "Always in there, just the two of them." Or, "She's got him wrapped around her little finger." They were not accusations, just observations, but they landed on me like blows, each one confirming the growing dread that had started as a flicker and was now a roaring fire in my gut. Finally, I couldn't hold it in. One evening as the office emptied out, I caught Sarah by the elevator. My voice was calm, too calm, the effort making my jaw ache. "Are you sleeping with Mr. Hayes?" The words came out blunt, devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. Her reaction was immediate, a defensive stiffness in her shoulders. She turned to me, her eyes narrow. "What are you talking about, Mark? You're being paranoid." Her tone was sharp, dismissive. "It's just professional courtesy. He's my boss. I have to be polite." "Polite?" I pressed, the anger starting to fray the edges of my composure. "It looks like a lot more than polite, Sarah, the way you look at him, the way he looks at you." She scoffed, a short, humorless sound. "You're just insecure, Mark. This is how things work at this level. You have to charm, you have to play the game. It's for my career, you don't understand the pressure." Her calm denial, her refusal to even acknowledge the possibility of anything deeper. The cold night air bit at my exposed hands as I leaned against the brick wall across from Sarah's apartment building. The streetlights cast long, indifferent shadows. My car was parked down the block, engine off, waiting. It was almost 2 in the morning when the taxi pulled up. Sarah stepped out, looking tired but composed. She paid the driver, adjusted her small purse on her shoulder, and started towards her entrance. I pushed myself off the wall, the sound of my shoes on the pavement unnaturally loud in the quiet street. "Sarah," she stopped dead, startled, her head whipping around. Her eyes widened when she saw me, a flash of pure shock on her face that quickly morphed into something else, a hard, cold resignation. Her shoulders stiffened. "Mark, what are you doing here?" Her voice was low, careful. "I saw you," I said, my voice hoarse, barely a whisper. The words felt like gravel in my throat. "I saw you leave his place. I want an explanation." She took a step back, her hand fumbling for her keys. "It's not what you think," she began, the familiar lie forming on her lips. But her eyes, even in the dim light, couldn't hold it. They darted away, betrayed by the truth that was too heavy to conceal. "Don't!" I cut her off, the effort to keep my voice steady almost physically painful. "Don't insult me. I saw you, Sarah. Coming out of his building, I waited for hours." The raw pain in my voice was unmistakable, broken and exposed under the unforgiving streetlights. She let out a slow breath, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to deflate her. Her gaze finally met mine, and there was a distant, almost analytical quality to it now. "Okay," she said, her voice flat. "You saw, so what?" The admission hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. "Yes," she continued, her words coming faster now, a practiced defense. "Yes, I'm with Mr. Hayes, but it's not what you think, Mark. This is the real world. You don't understand how things work." Her explanation unfurled like a carefully prepared statement. "It wasn't about love or even affection," she said. "It was about practicality. This is a necessary step for my career. A sacrifice. To get ahead, you have to be willing to do what others won't." Her voice was devoid of emotion, a business transaction reduced to stark terms. She wasn't just admitting it, she was justifying it, turning it into a logical choice, a calculation. And here, in this cold, quiet moment, I found myself reflecting on how some decisions, even those made with the clearest logic, always come with a price. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Then came the sharpest cuts. She looked past me, as if remembering details that only cemented her position. "I knew Eleanor, his wife, from a charity event last year, before I even worked at the company. That's how I met Mr. Hayes. He actually helped me land the executive assistant job in the first place." The words fell like stones, each one hitting me with a fresh wave of nausea. He hadn't just been my boss. He had been the architect of her career. And I now realize of my own blind trust. I felt utterly used, a pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. My love, the tenderness I'd felt for her, turned to ash in my mouth, bitter and foul. "You played me," I accused, my voice barely a whisper, thick with unshed tears. The effort to hold them back tightened my throat, burning behind my eyes. All of it was a lie, everything we had, everything we talked about. Sarah remained detached, her face a mask of cold pragmatism. There was no trace of remorse, no hint of the Sarah who'd laughed at my jokes or shared her dreams of stability. My pain seemed to barely register with her, a minor inconvenience in her grand scheme. She shifted her weight, a subtle gesture of impatience. You're naive, Mark, she said, her voice softer now, almost pitying. You think things are simple. I was just doing what I had to do to get ahead, what any smart person would do. The conversation was over. There was nothing left to say. The foundation of everything I believed, everything I thought we were building, crumbled into dust around me. I turned, unable to look at her anymore, unable to breathe the same air. I walked away, shattered, leaving her standing under the indifferent glow of the streetlights, my whole world collapsing in on itself with every step. The weeks that followed Sarah's confession were a blur of cold anger and profound emptiness. I fell into a deep depression, the days bleeding into one another, haunted by the memory of her cold pragmatism and the searing pain of her betrayal. Sleep offered little escape, my dreams filled with distorted echoes of her voice, her face, her hands, all now tainted by the truth. At work, my performance suffered. The meticulous attention to detail that had once defined my marketing reports vanished. I became withdrawn, answering in monosyllables, my gaze fixed on my monitor, though I saw nothing. The burning anger inside me simmered constantly, a low, persistent flame that demanded an outlet, a hunger for justice, or perhaps simply revenge. I started to channel that anger, that broken focus, into something concrete. My marketing research skills, usually employed to analyze consumer behavior and market trends, were now directed towards a single, destructive purpose: digging up dirt on Mr. Hayes. I worked mostly from home, late at night, hunched over my laptop, fueled by black coffee and a relentless drive. I combed through public records, obscure corporate filings, industry journals, anything that might offer a glimpse into the hidden corners of his empire. Slowly, painstakingly, a picture began to emerge. I uncovered evidence of brazen tax evasion, meticulously disguised through shell corporations and offshore accounts. There were records of shady business deals, backroom agreements that skirted the edges of legality, and questionable transactions involving property acquired under dubious circumstances. The sheer scale of Mr. Hayes' corruption was staggering, far beyond the petty office politics I had imagined. Each discovery, each verified piece of malfeasance hardened my resolve. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. This was about him, about bringing down the man who had built his life on deceit, who had enabled Sarah's climb through moral compromise. Revenge became a clear, tangible goal. One quiet evening, after compiling a thick folder of incriminating documents, a name surfaced in my mind. Eleanor Hayes, Mr. Hayes' wife. A public figure in her own right, often featured in local society pages, always impeccably dressed, poised, and elegant. I found her on LinkedIn. Her profile was sparse, professional, but the pictures confirmed my memory. An attractive woman with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She held several board positions for local charities. I knew this was the next step. I crafted a careful message, vague enough not to arouse suspicion, but direct enough to pique her interest. Regarding a matter of mutual interest concerning Mr. Hayes, I wrote, requesting a discreet meeting. To my surprise, she replied within hours. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe, a good 20 miles from the city center, far from any prying eyes that might recognize either of us. The cafe was small, tastefully decorated, mostly empty save for a few elderly patrons. Eleanor arrived promptly, dressed in a simple but expensive cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. She sat across from me, her posture erect, her hands clasped on the table. Her face was unreadable, a cool mask of composure. I began to speak, my voice low, metal with the accumulated frustration and pain of months. I poured out the story, the affair, Sarah's cold calculation, Mr. Hayes' complicity, and finally the mountain of evidence I had gathered against him. She listened intently, her gaze unwavering, her expression revealing nothing. No gasps, no shock, no tears, just a quiet absorption of every word. But then, as I finished, recounting the night I followed Sarah to his building, I caught it. A faint, knowing smile played briefly on her lips, quickly suppressed, but unmistakably there. It was a flicker of something almost amused, a recognition I couldn't quite place. Thank you, Mark, she said, her voice calm, devoid of the emotional turmoil I had expected. This confirms a great deal for me. She paused, her eyes meeting mine, and a different kind of intensity flickered there. I've been aware of Gerald's philandering ways for years. Sarah isn't the first, and she certainly wouldn't be the last. The bluntness of her statement took me aback. She then continued, her voice gaining a steely edge. I married Gerald for stability, Mark, for his connections, his influence, not for love. Her words were delivered with a cold, almost detached honesty. But there are limits, and I want out. She looked directly at me then, her gaze sharp, unwavering. I want a divorce, and I want half of everything he owns. She tapped the folder I had borrowed, which now lay between us on the table. Your information, she stated, is the perfect leverage I need to get what's rightfully mine. In that moment, sitting across from her, a sudden, unsettling clarity washed over me. We were two damaged souls, both used, both betrayed, but for very different reasons. We had found a common enemy and a shared, if transactional, purpose. We formed an unlikely alliance, a quiet, cold pact. She wanted half his wealth. I wanted his ruin. And in her elegant, composed demeanor, I saw a reflection of the cold realism that had shattered my own world. I meticulously compiled the last of the damning evidence, organizing it into a clear, concise package for Eleanor's lawyer. She wasted no time. Her divorce filing hit the courts, quickly followed by strategic leaks of Mr. Hayes' financial misconduct to the local press. The headlines were brutal, unflinching. Mr. Hayes' corporate empire, built on shadow and deception, buckled fast under the weight of the scandal. Faced with public humiliation and complete financial ruin, he conceded to Eleanor's harsh terms, agreeing to virtually everything she demanded. He was forced to sell his shares, resign in disgrace, and disappeared from the company, a sudden, quiet erasure. Sarah, a minor casualty in the larger war, was swiftly dismissed by the cautious interim CEO, a desperate move to distance the company from the toxic fallout. Her career ambitions, for which she had sacrificed so much, lay shattered. She lost everything she had played the game for. I watched it all unfold from a distance, expecting some surge of triumph, a rush of vindication. Instead, there was only a hollow, aching emptiness. The company, once the stage for my humiliation and now his ruin, became unbearable. I quit, walking away without a backward glance, leaving behind the stale air and the lingering ghosts of who I used to be. I was a ghost myself, a shadow of the man who had walked into that office. My innocence, my faith in people, all irrevocably lost. The revenge, once a burning need, tasted like ash in my mouth. It left a profound sense of desolation, a vast, quiet sorrow echoing the wide, empty Midwestern landscape around me. The price paid had been far too heavy. The company, stripped bare by scandal, continued to operate, a hollowed-out shell of what it once was. Mr. Hayes, now a pariah, was a memory whispered in hushed tones, his grand office taken over by an interim leader who spoke of rebuilding with cautious optimism. Sarah, too, was gone, her carefully constructed future dissolving as swiftly as it had formed. I saw her once, months later, working a counter at a coffee shop downtown. She looked thinner, her eyes holding a resignation I recognized from my own reflection. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The satisfaction I had anticipated, the sweet taste of victory, never arrived. Instead, a persistent ache settled in my chest, a deep, quiet emptiness that no amount of success or justice could fill. I had sought revenge, and I had found it, but it hadn't healed anything. It had only hollowed me out further. The wide, flat expanse of the Midwestern sky often felt like a mirror, reflecting a vast internal desolation. I had destroyed a world, but in doing so, I had also irrevocably broken my own.